As the Illyrian fleet swept westward across the stars, they passed once more the orbit of Euaeus, where Elberyn had laid his father to rest. A solemn hush settled over the crew. Soon after, they descended to a green temperate planet in the Belcuran system, an old ally. There, Elberyn called a halt to their journey. It was 1 year to the day since Elian's death, and he deemed it fitting to honor the man who had guided Illyris through desolation. He proclaimed funeral games in the old custom, including a starship race, not with heavy warcraft but sleek personal vessels modified for speed and maneuverability. It would test skill, nerve, and honor as pilots raced low through valleys and cloud banks, engines thundering under the gaze of all. Beneath a pale orange sky, 4 sleek vessels stood poised on the launch pad. First, the Chimera, a broad-framed gunship commanded by the hot-blooded Renzo. Next, the Pristis, sharp and angular, helmed by the calm Eudon. Then, the Centaur, heavy yet balanced, flown by the reckless Aimer. Last, the Scylla, the most elegant, a gleaming prototype with experimental thrust stabilizers, piloted by the pious, composed Benzaline. The course twisted through the Belcuran Highlands canyons, a treacherous gauntlet of jagged peaks and rusting orbital debris. At the midpoint, a red pulsing signal beacon marked the turn back to the starting line. Elberyn watched from the command ace, and at his signal the ships ignited their cores and roared into the clouds. The ships flew like thunderbolts, engines howling, contrails spiraling across the sky. Renzo seized the early lead, the Chimera surging with brute force. Aimer, too reckless, grazed a canyon wall, scraping his wing. Eudon held steady, biding his time. Benzaline, with a quiet smile, twisted his yoke, and the Scylla glided like light through the shattered towers of the old station. At the beacon, Renzo misjudged his turn, and Eudon capitalized, surging ahead. In the final stretch, ocean winds battered the racers as the Pristis and the Scylla flew neck and neck. Benzaline, crying out to the machine gods, found a sudden burst of speed. The Scylla crossed the finish line first, its engines singing. The crowd roared in delight as the victor saluted. Elberyn, head veiled with laurel leaves, presented the prizes: a gold-embroidered cloak for Benzaline, armor pieces for Eudon, silver cups for Renzo, and a slave woman for Aemar. As the games unfolded, Lurgo, the wrathful Artelect, saw her chance to strike again. She turned to the Illyrian women, widows, mothers, daughters, who had endured 2 years of exile among the stars since Illyris's fall. Dust, strange skies, and no home to call their own had worn them down. Lurgo, seizing their weariness, seeded unrest.
These petulant men and their games, they care nothing for our children's home. How long must we flee? Why not build here on this kind land? Why chase a promised land that never comes? Enough of endless space!
Discontent festered, their frustration igniting into fury. A cry rose, then another, swelling into a frenzy. The women stormed the ships, ripping out conduits and power cores, smashing sensor arrays and guidance fins. Sparks flew, flames caught, and several hulls were consumed in the blaze. Smoke curled into the air, black against the afternoon sun. Elberyn, from the high cliffs overlooking the landing zone, saw it first. His heart froze. With his captains at his heels, he raced towards the burning ships, shouting orders, dragging hoses and coordinating frantic efforts to douse the blaze. But for some vessels it was too late. Desperation gripped him. If the entire fleet burned, the journey to Albera, the promised empire, would die. On the scorched launch pad, Elberyn fell to his knees, arms raised to the heavens.
Oh, Salistar, if you still favor us, if the empire you promised is to rise, save our fleet. Let us not fail in fire.
The heavens answered. With a metallic roar, the sky split open. A massive thunderhead formed above, unleashing pounding rain that drenched the flames in moments. The fire hissed and died under the storm's fury. When the clouds parted, only 4 ships were lost beyond repair. Elberon stood in the dim hours before dawn, watching the smoke rise faintly from the ships. Was this another sign that this green, fertile land was not their destined home? His thoughts churned, torn between duty and rest, fate and mercy. It was then that Wyvis, his old companion, came to him. The man spoke plainly, as was his way.
Elberon, my lord, not all are meant for the full arc of destiny. Let the weary remain, the old, the broken, those who no longer wish to wander, grant them peace. Let them find a home here.
And so it was decided. At sunrise, Elberon led a solemn ceremony. He walked the new boundaries by hand, staking out a safe and fertile plot on the Belcoran coast. Homes were raised, walls plotted, storehouses cleared. Temples and altars were consecrated to the gods who had watched over them and to those who had tested them. It would be an Illyrian Belcoran colony. Not the promised land, but a promise kept. Here, for some, the journey ended. For others, it would begin anew. And so, fewer in number, the fleet departed once more. Hertha contemplated how Lorgo had sabotaged the fleet, stirred rebellion, nearly undone the sacred journey. Once more she made contact with Ibriel, requesting safe passage through the cosmos. Ibriel agreed, but he was not without his price, and the machine gods demand blood. That night, amid routine maintenance, Bryn was alone outside the hull, suspended in space, tethered by cable and oxygen. Hertha waited until no one was paying attention, then severed the line. The cable snapped silently. The feed cut. Bryn twisted around just in time to see his ship retreating from view, the stars behind him opening wide. His limbs flailed. He tried to scream, to signal, but the comms were dead, and no one was listening. He drifted into darkness. Inside, Elberon noticed too late. When the fleet's formation reshuffled and Bryn failed to report, a hollow dread spread through the bridge. Hertha had no answers. They searched and called his name out into the abyss, but there was only silence. The fleet pressed on towards Albera, undisturbed.